Welcome. I'm Jason Scott Montoya. I'm here with a friend and a leader from my church, Duff Tucker. Welcome, Duff.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. I'm happy to interview you as part of this series of Inspirational People. We originally got connected, was it November, October of last year or so? Part of what's called a leadership development group. Duff is a co-leader in the group that I'm participating in through our church at Gwinnett Church, led by Jeff Henderson and at the head, Andy Stanley. So thank you for joining me. Tell me about yourself, your story, what you do, what you're doing, how you're doing it.
Sure. Well, originally I'm a Mainer or a maniac. I'm from Maine.
Which part?
I always tell people there are two clans in Maine. So I'm from northern Maine. You're going to hear a Canadian accent in my accent a little bit. I grew up 30 minutes from Canada. I always tell people there are two clans in Maine. There are fishermen, or lobstermen, and lumberjacks. So your lobstermen, live on the coast, obviously, and their families and generations of fishermen.
Yeah.
And lumberjacks live inland, and they work at paper mills. They cut wood, and that's what I grew up in a mill town.
Yeah.
Where just about everybody's dad worked at the mill, or they worked in the woods. My grandfather worked at a mill. My uncle worked at a mill. My dad actually worked for the telephone company. But that's kind of how it was. Everybody knew everyone, 50 kids in my graduating class.
Okay.
And so I grew up there. I lived probably till about 36, 37, I lived in Maine.
Okay.
And I worked in a family business. And then as my kids got a little bit older, I met this guy through Little League. Our kids were the same age playing baseball. And he, I kept running into him, and we got along pretty well. And then, so one day he said, "Hey, come over to my office. I want to talk to you." And so what I found out is he was like a vice president for this big corporation based in California.
Oh, okay.
And he traveled so much, it didn't matter where he lived, and his wife was from Maine. So they were there, and he's like, I don't know if you know what I do, but here's what I do. I work with brands to put their gift cards in grocery stores. And I think you'd be good at it. You should quit working for your dad and come work for me. And So I talked to my dad. He said, "Hey, try it. You can always come back to work."
Yeah. How old were you at the time?
Let's see. That was probably 2007. So I was probably 34.
Okay.
35. Yep. So I went to work for him and really got involved in a corporate culture of business to business, where I was coaching and consulting lots of businesses and brands on sales, on marketing, on placement, that sort of thing. And I really fell in love with that form of business, of being behind the scenes and really coming alongside a business and understanding their passion, their purpose.
Yeah.
And then I could focus on the details.
Yeah.
Behind
how do I make that happen, essentially?
So that they could focus on the passion, right?
Yeah.
And so I really fell in love with that idea of doing that. Of course, I'm married. I'm a father, and for me, understanding God, understanding fatherhood and unconditional love really didn't click until I became a father myself. And you have this little human being that's as big as a football that's totally dependent on you, and you couldn't love anything anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think that really impacted me as well, as far as driving a desire to lead and wanting to have influence and have an impact on people. So professionally, I love the idea of coaching and pouring into people. Personally, I love the idea of having an impact on my family and the people I lead.
Yeah.
So I continue to develop that over my life. And I was really fortunate that growing up, I had multiple generations pouring into me. I had a grandfather, I had a father, I had uncles, really pouring into me for identity and kind of what everything was as a man. And I thought that was pretty common. And as I became an adult, I realized that that I wasn't the norm. That was, it's sadly, it's abnormal to have multiple generations pouring into you. So that kind of drove that drove me as well, as far as wanting to take what was a gift for me and really pour into others that maybe didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, to carry that legacy
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
Yep. So I went through a divorce 2015. That was a real big blow to my identity, because my identity was in being somebody's husband. My identity
Mm-hmm.
was in being a father. And so there were a couple things going in that season.
Yeah.
And one was I was no longer anybody's husband.
Yeah.
And second thing were my sons were getting older,
Mm.
and they were young men. So my identity as their dad was changing.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't need me in the same ways. They still needed me, but not like a small child needs.
Yeah.
So going through all that, I got invited to participate in leader development group through North Point, which is a affiliate church of Gwinnett.
Yeah.
And so I went through that, and it kind of really put things in perspective for me, and got me back on track with having an identity in God, and then
Yeah.
getting filled through there so I could pour into others. It had such an impact that when I had the opportunity to co-lead and be involved in it, I jumped at it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that's how we got connected.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so from that to a couple of things that I'm dabbling in, I launched a podcast this year. I
Yeah.
call my podcast Winning at Manhood.
Yeah.
And it's really, the purpose of the podcast is really discussion starters for men's groups. It's a very short podcast, 7-8 minutes.
Yeah.
And it introduces an idea.
Yeah.
I share my thoughts. It's like a monologue.
Mm-hmm.
I share my thoughts about it, and 8 minutes it's over, and then it can kind of open that discussion with other guys.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, so let's kind of shift to talking about, on my blog and the content that I create, it's around this idea of what does it mean to live better? What does it mean to work smarter? What does that mean to you? Is that something you strive for? Why? How do you go about it? Let's dive into that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, one word really comes to mind when I think about living better and working smarter, and that word is balance. So I think maintaining a healthy balance in all aspects of life, right? So like work, family, health, spiritually, and personal growth too, or learning. So
yeah. So what is out of balance in your mind? What does that look like?
Okay, so out of balance is that's a great question. So out of balance for me is when too much focus gets put on one area, whether that be, and it happens, right? So you're constantly maintaining that struggle, because work can get crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe you have big reports or projects that are coming due, and so instead of shutting off your computer at 5:30, you're finding yourself shutting down at 6, having dinner, and then getting back on at 8 and working till 11.
Yeah.
So that's out of balance.
Yeah. And what's wrong with that? What if someone's doing that and they're like, what hey, I don't see a problem with this. What's your response to them?
I don't think it's sustainable long term,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think you have to be realistic, because there are seasons when you have to shift balance. But if you're pouring 80% of you into work, it only leaves 20% of you left for your health, for your family, for you spiritually. And also, I always tend to think about this idea of when you're pouring into others, you're like a pitcher, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're pouring all the time, and you're not taking time to refill that pitcher, eventually you're pouring emptiness into other people. And so that's where it gets unhealthy. Now, there's always going to be a season when something's going to take precedence. I think of our friend Benji, and the struggle he went through with his family last year, and he lost a daughter to leukemia.
Yeah.
His life was out of balance because his whole focus was on his family at that time, and it had to be. Mm-hmm. It had to be. But now you see him doing the work.
Yeah. So let's kind of dive into that idea a little bit more, as we're in the middle of this sort of worldwide crisis with this pandemic. So is it even possible to have that balance? I mean, we kind of are in survival mode, or what do we do to make sure we keep our job, or people are worried about keeping their job, or they're trying to be proactive. How do they maintain that balance in this really crazy season that we find ourselves in?
Yeah. So I think there's a gift in all of the madness that is COVID-19,
Yeah.
and I think there's a gift of time that's been given to us. The craziness, the busyness, the got to be there, got to go there. The as a parent, you're running kids to different practices, different school
Hmm.
events, and you're balancing this crazy schedule. Well, that's all been shut down, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Nobody's going anywhere,
Yeah.
and so you have this gift of time,
Hmm.
and I think the balance comes from okay, I've got some room to breathe. I've
Yeah.
got some time. How am I going to invest that time wisely? So,
Yeah.
so there's a scramble to, if you don't work remote, like you and I both work remote. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit business as usual for us, but there are a lot of businesses, there are a lot of professionals out there that are scrambling to get remote.
Yeah.
And as they get remote, they're finding that, hey, I'm not commuting an hour to work and an hour home every day. So I just gained 2 hours in my day. You
Yeah.
know, I'm getting up and I'm at work.
Yeah.
So so it's I think it's seeing the opportunities
Hmm.
and being intentional with those opportunities in this season that you can I've got 2 hours back. So how can I pour into myself and fill myself up in
Hmm.
this uncertainty? There's this time of uncertainty. So how do I put my mind at ease and really use that time? And so that's time that maybe I wasn't spending with my family, that now I have that time to spend with my family.
Yeah.
That time to get centered
Hmm.
with myself, because I'm leading a family. So I need to be on point, and I need to make sure that I'm getting enough rest. I'm pouring into myself enough so that I can pour into others,
Yeah.
and then balancing out the work and everything else. So
Yeah. So you mentioned the idea of, filling yourself up so you can pour out on others, and Andy Stanley, he often says the idea of, it's not our responsibility that someone receives what we give, but it's our responsibility to empty ourselves each day. So when you think about as being a leader, what does it look like for you to help others maintain that balance, to live better, to work smarter?
yeah, that's it. So that's a great. So I think for me, leading by example is a big thing, and I think
Yeah.
that there are three types of leaders that I tend to see. There are leaders that lead with controlling authority,
Hmm.
right? So they're the because I said so leaders, right? Just
Yeah.
do it because I said so. Don't ask
Authority
me.
versus influence, right?
Right,
Leveraging
right,
authorities.
exactly. So it's a controlling issue. Don't question me. Don't ask why.
Yeah.
Just but those leaders, they miss the teaching moments
Mm,
and they miss the relationship, right?
yeah. So they
So
might get stuff done,
right,
but there's a cost to that getting by taking control, they're losing influence.
yeah, or they never had it, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so then the second kind of leader that I see a lot of the time are they're what I call a compromising leader. So
Okay.
they're the do as I say, not as I do,
Mm,
right? So
hypocritical.
yeah, so they know what's best for you, but they don't heed to their own advice. And
Mm. But is it? I mean, to some degree, aren't we? We're all kind of fall into both of those at some degree.
absolutely,
But that second one, how do you reconcile? As a leader, you may not be perfect in that regard, but you
right.
also have a standard. So how do you reconcile your example with standards and expectations?
Yeah, so I think it's about being authentic, right? And it's
Hmm.
about being honest with yourself. And
Hmm.
so, to your point, we're all three of those kinds of leaders, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to be the do as I say, not as I do. I don't
Yeah.
it's because they're not firm in their convictions and they waver. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be the leader that's, hey, because I said so.
Hmm.
Because I want a relationship, and I want to have teaching moments. And I'm big about, with my sons, some of my biggest teaching moments with them were like we were taking a road trip and we're just sitting, side by side in a car and just having
Yeah.
conversations. And those are the moments where you have an impact. And I think of myself growing up, the biggest moments that had an impact for me with me were when my dad or my grandfather were taking me fishing, And it
Yeah.
wasn't like sitting down having a big conversation with me. It's just talking while, and the Bible talks about that too, right? Talk to your children while you're walking by the way.
Yeah.
That's teach, and that's when you talk. And so that's where that last type of leader, that's the influential leader. He's the one that has influence, and and they earn it over time because
Yeah.
they're investing in the
You
point.
want to follow their lead.
Yeah, you want to follow them because you believe in them and you believe that they care about you.
Yeah.
And so that's the type of leader we all strive to be. And to your point, we're all three.
Yeah. Yeah.
Times, right?
Just in different degrees, right?
You get exhausted. Kids are running around crazy. And you're like, just because I said so.
Yeah.
But being self-aware and being authentic lets us know that okay, I'm falling short as a leader, and we're never going to do this perfectly, right?
Yeah.
But
I do think, to your point about authenticity, I think the idea of being humble, and it's one thing to also to live by example and to fail, but to be humble in that and say, hey, I dropped the ball, or I am failing. But it's another thing to then condemn other people for not doing the very thing that I'm not doing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think Steve Jobs, he had a quote that was really good that always jumped out at me, and he said, management's about persuading people to do things they don't want to do, while leadership is about inspiring people to do the things they never thought they could.
Yeah.
And so that's very similar to what I'm talking about, inspirational leadership.
Yeah. So that's a good quote to kind of encapsulate this next question, and the idea of, we're in this crisis. Many people that are team members or followers, they're not sure what's happening. There's uncertainty, there's fear. That authority leader sounds kind of good in this season of crisis. So tell me how you tap into the influence over the authority when it seems like one might be better for the situation.
Sure. So, well, I think there's a couple things. We do this by our actions, right?
Yeah.
Plain and simple. It's not about perfection. It's about being authentic. I think it's okay to say, hey, I'm not sure what the right thing is to do here, but let's be cautious. Let's be wise, and let's be prepared. And part of being prepared as a leader is having a plan. And so I talk in my first three podcasts are mission, vision, and values, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
a mission is the wow, right? It's the goal, it's the dream.
Yeah.
The vision is the how. That's the plan. And so I think that's how we lead in this season. Is you have to have a plan of how I'm going to lead. And my plan isn't determined by my circumstances or what's going on in the world. This is just how I lead, whether things are going well or things are going poorly. These are the things I do. These are the things I don't do. And I think that's where leaders waver, and that's where we kind of fall into that compromising leader category, is if we don't have a plan that, hey, something as simple as, hey, I don't lie because I don't lie. And so just because there's a pandemic going on doesn't mean it's okay for me to lie in this season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it.
So I'm gonna maintain my values regardless of what the circumstances are.
Yeah. And so it's about establishing those values too, right? Like it's never good. You think about when you're in high school and you're dating a girl and stuff. Okay, well, when things are getting hot and heavy in the backseat of the car, that's not the time to develop your plan for purity.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to work.
Yeah, you got to figure out those things before it gets crazy. And I think to that point, it is going to be hard to do that in the middle of a tough situation. And in fact, the tough situation, the storm, if you will, that we're facing is more of a revealer of what those values are or have been cultivated before this has actually started.
Yeah. And you see it in leadership. You see some that are doing a really great job, and you're seeing our communities come together, and you're seeing people come together, and then you're seeing leaders that want to play the blame game, and they want to, and it really doesn't matter where the pandemic came from or how it was caused. It's here, and we need to deal with it.
It's reality.
It's reality. So I mean, there's a level, I guess, of importance to that, but we're in the midst of it right now, so we need to deal with it and figure it out.
Yeah. So how would you go about guiding or teaching someone, in this at all, in any situation, I mean, you're obviously participating in the leadership development group that I'm doing. What are some other ways that you're, as an example, pouring into people?
Yep. So again, it's by example, and for me, it's talking. It's talking as I'm doing things, and kind of explaining the why.
Yeah.
With my kids, I'm explaining the why behind, hey, we don't go to the store every day right now.
Mm-hmm.
We go once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks, and I'm trying to stock up. And it's not because it's not fear driven, but it's protection driven. I want to protect you guys, and I also want to protect these other people that might be at the store, because you don't know, you could be carrying this virus and you don't know it. You're not showing any symptoms or anything. And so the best thing for us to do is to be prepared, make as few trips out as we can. And, we're living a little more organized these days, and it's less, what do I feel like for dinner, and more like,
like, which is interesting, because in a crisis, we have a tendency to get more focused.
Yep.
And
so I think to your point, heightened focus, living an example, but taking the opportunity to explain this is how we're gonna do it, and this is why we're gonna do it this way.
Yeah.
And I think that I know I'm seeing that with my family. There's a level of peace, and there's a level of comfort, and I'm building influence. And I'm remarried now. I've been remarried for a couple of years, so I'm blending a family. So I'm a stepdad, right, which is kind of like a substitute teacher.
Yeah.
So, but I'm building. I have 2 stepchildren that are living in the house, and it's a little unnerving. It's a little unsettling what's going on, and so I see the opportunity to build value as a leader with them, to build trust, to build influence with them. That, hey, Duff's got our best interests at heart, and he's taking wise steps, and he's being prepared.
Yeah.
Or they could be saying other things, right?
Yeah.
It's all based on what I'm exampling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And so, I guess also, in addition to talking and leading by example, another way to be there for others is simply to listen and be present with them.
Yeah.
Is that also what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep. So I think, and it's so funny you mentioned that, right? Because I'm always, and it's a personality thing, and so you tend to love on people the way that you like to receive love, and so I'm all about serving and protecting. But you're absolutely right. There are those moments, and thankfully I have a wife that is really great about kind of giving me a gentle nudge that, hey, it's great that you're a fixer and that you want to do things, but we really just need you to sit and listen right now.
Yeah.
And be with us, present in the moment. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for the reminder.
So let's shift to stories. Let's get kind of into some of the specific stories and systems, but let's start with stories. And both you and I, we connect a lot in terms of movies and feeling like how God speaks to us through stories. And so tell me about, what are some stories, experiences, that you've heard or witnessed or been a part of that have resonated with you, and how they've affected you.
Yeah. So, God totally speaks to me and gives me nudges through movies, through music. And our friend Stephen has this great thing. He says, pay attention when you hear the same message in multiple places, because that's a nudge from God.
Yeah.
And so, for me, one of those nudges, and I call it the Batman theory, but it came to me through that Dark Knight trilogy with Chris Nolan.
Yeah.
Was a thing I experienced in my younger years working in my family business with my dad. My dad's only 21 years older than me.
Okay.
And so he was a young man. When I'm in my 20s, he's in his early 40s. He's a young man.
Yeah.
And we used to lock horns all the time because I was always trying to prove myself to him and make him proud of me.
And he was very set in his ways, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. but also, I think he was trying to make me proud of him because the business was relatively new in those days. And so he was trying to build value and influence, really, where he was like, you can trust me with this. You can. So we would lock horns a lot of the time. And then years later, a couple of other places that came from was I had an uncle that was a missionary for OTAN, And
Okay.
he described himself as being the man behind the man,
Yeah.
because he wasn't really on the front line speaking, but he
Yeah.
was handling the back end of the business. And
Mm.
so that kind of resonated in me too. What's it look like to be the man behind the man? And
Yeah.
then lastly, when Chris Nolan releases the Dark Knight trilogy, there's all this emphasis in that movie around the people that Bruce Wayne surrounds himself with,
Hmm.
whether it's Lucius Fox or Alfred
Hmm.
Butler. And that
That
really
equip him and help him and enable him and
and
empower him.
held him accountable, but had influence with him, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of came up with this Batman theory out of it, where
Yeah.
everybody wants to be Batman because he's
Yeah.
the hero and he's getting the action, and he's doing these great, amazing things.
Yeah.
But I think there's a season where you're Batman.
Yeah.
Then there's a season where you step back and you have to be Alfred.
Yeah.
Alfred has influence,
Hmm.
right? He has influence with Batman that nobody else has,
Hmm.
because he's the one that's kind of making sure
Yeah.
he's staying on task with the mission,
Yeah.
and he's
And
not too far. And
yeah.
so
Well,
that
and in the movies, he's influencing him. And there's kind of these key moments, but one of the ones that sticks out too, I think in the third movie, is he leaves.
yeah
He leaves, and he felt like Batman had gone too far, and that was his way of influencing him in that situation, right?
yeah exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, in my season now. I'm 47. My sons are 23 and 21, and so I'm in this season where I'm looking for the opportunities to embrace my Alfred and
Yeah.
influence with my sons and allow them to be the hero,
Yeah.
and but be that influence behind the scenes. And
Yeah. But that transition from hero to supporting cast, that as and I don't know if for men it's harder than women, but it seems like that might be the case.
yeah,
Um, how do you make that transition? What I mean, obviously that's a humbling process, right? To go, I'm not the man anymore,
yeah.
But tell me more about that.
Well, for me, it's a little bit about it's a little bit about enjoying the investment that I've made in my sons, and pouring into them all these years, and leading them, and being that hero early on, and now allowing them to step back and actually put into practice the things I've been talking to them about and teaching them about.
Yeah.
And also um, you know giving them encouragement that, hey, I believe in you. You've got what it takes.
Yeah.
I'm going to step back and I'm going to let you lead, and I'm here with you, but you got this. And
Hmm.
so I think that's a big moment in a young man's life that a lot of fathers miss out on.
Hmm.
And I think for women, a big opportunity a lot of women miss out on is when their sons become young men and choose wives.
Hmm.
And I think moms, there's always this struggle of I'm not the first lady in my son's life anymore, and so they tend to send a message to their daughter-in-laws that you're not exactly what I had in mind for my son. A lot of the time there's all this strife between daughters and moms, and so I think you have to pay attention to the different seasons and what your role is and what
Yeah.
your responsibility is.
Yeah.
And so I'm preparing for that season of, my oldest is getting married in the fall. And so how do I make his wife understand that she's exactly what I would want my son
Hmm.
to choose? And I'm so thankful he did.
And it's also an opportunity for you and for you to be a mentor as
yeah,
well. So they're not going to be a fully formed, a mature person at that age, but you can
right.
help be a part of moving them towards that.
Yeah. How do I pour into their marriage and invest in it instead of being a stumbling block?
Yeah, tearing it
They're
down.
gonna have enough of those.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to be that. So
Yeah,
so
yeah. So so the other kind of story that comes to my mind when you talk about the idea of the Alfred to the Batman is Lord of the Rings, right? So you got Sam and Frodo, and Sam is helping Frodo along the way, but you also have a lot of other supporting casts that are all helping carry make the ring, the trip to the Mordor successful, and so that's another one that sticks out for me as well.
yeah, everybody has a part and a
Yeah.
purpose.
Hmm.
Yep.
So let's shift over to systems. We talked about stories. Let's talk about systems. What does that mean to you? What does that word mean to you? How do you apply systems to your life, your work?
Yeah.
What systems do you use that are most helpful and worth sharing?
Yeah. This question is interesting to me. So I kind of looked up the definition of a system, right?
Yeah.
So a system is a set of rules, an arrangement of things, or a group of related things that work towards a common goal.
Okay.
So in hearing that, I kind of find myself asking, what's my goal or
Yeah.
what's the mission? And then how am I going to achieve that?
Mm-hmm.
So my mission is to bring value, purpose, and clear direction to people through servant leadership. That's
Mm-hmm.
my personal mission.
Yeah.
So the system that I use to deliver that mission is I wrote a creed
Okay.
that was based off of things that I was taught growing up. And I've talked about this before, where um, the idea of in Christianity, the idea of salvation is you come to a realization that you're a sinner. You can't do it on your own, and
Mm-hmm.
you come to the realization that, okay, God sent His Son to pay the debt of our sins,
Yeah.
and if you accept Him as your Savior, then you're an adopted son. You're righteous, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're righteous. Now, when you get saved, you don't really feel that. Some people may feel a little bit
Yeah.
different, but I didn't feel like transformed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that. I was like, okay, well, I understand I need a Savior,
Yeah.
and then I continued on, but I matured into that salvation, into that righteousness. I've been maturing into that for
Yeah.
25 years probably now, and I'm continuing, and I'm still, as I walk with God, as I study His Word, as I do those things, I keep maturing into that.
Yeah.
That's something that was really modeled to me by my father, by my grandfather as well,
Yeah.
uh, in my identity as a Tucker. And so I didn't know what it meant to be a Tucker when I was a little boy. And I didn't know what that represented, but over the course of 18, 20 years, I had men, women, aunts and uncles that were all Tuckers pouring into me and saying, hey, this is what it means. This is what we
Mm-hmm.
do. This is what we stand for. I think Christianity is that same thing, right? The Bible is teaching us, this is what we do. This is who we are. This is what we stand for. And
Yeah.
when you fall short, you fall away, you go back to that, and you have people around you going, no, that's not what we do. This is what we stand for. So it's not about doing it perfectly. It's about
Yeah.
maturing into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so developing a creed was really having that system,
Yeah.
those guidelines in place that are holding me and reminding me
Yeah.
what I stand for and what I believe in, so that when I get off the path, when I get off course,
Yeah.
I can go back to those and go, oh, I'm off track. I need to get
Mm-hmm.
back on track.
Yeah.
And so I developed my system, my creed, and it's
Yeah.
really just 4 pillars, right? So
Yeah.
strength, steadfast, selfless, and fearless integrity.
Mm.
And then I defined what each of those were,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I go. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I go about it.
Yeah. And so how does that apply, how do you apply, you kind of explain how you apply that to yourself. How
Yep.
does that apply as you lead your family? How does that system apply in your work?
Sure. So I think it resonates, like I apply it to myself and the way I carry myself.
Yeah.
And the way I carry myself is how I'm exempling it to my family. That it goes all the way across the gambit, because I don't only apply it to just my own personal decisions, but decisions I'm making as a family,
Yeah.
decisions I make at work.
Yeah.
The guidelines that I set when I'm traveling for
Mm-hmm.
business. The so it just kind of it goes across the whole gambit, and then it applies to other systems that you might use to create efficiencies, other things you might
Yeah.
use. Whether it's I recharge I recharge with solitude, and I watch TV. But my creed might delegate what I watch and what I don't watch.
Yeah.
Same thing with raising kids and disciplining, and
Mm-hmm.
I try to talk a lot to my kids about the difference between punishment and discipline.
Yeah.
discipline is something you do when somebody you love, with somebody you love, that you're pouring into and investing. And a punishment's kind of like it's colder, right?
Yeah.
So
Calculated.
it's calculated, right?
Yeah.
And there, you're not really with a punishment. You're not really trying to pour into anybody, teach anybody, or invest. You're just trying to stop.
Yeah. It's that authority versus influence.
Exactly. Yeah. And so my creed kind of delegates that as well. You know, how am I correcting my children? How am I teaching my children? How am I encouraging them? That drives that. And that drives it in that direction of disciplining and investing and coaching and talking versus punishing.
Yeah. So how is that system helping you in this crisis that we're?
Great question. So it's established and it's set in place, right? And so for example, my definition of strength is that you are made a strong man for a purpose. Strength is for protection. You use it to protect those you love and those who can't protect themselves.
Yeah.
Those in your care find safety in your strength, never fear or intimidation. All right. So, you know, I'm a pretty big guy. I could be intimidating to people. I could be using my strength in a wrong way in this time, and I could be, you know, really be the Lord of the toilet paper in this.
Yeah.
If I wanted to. No. But how am I using my strength in this season? Am I using it to make people feel protected, or am I using it to intimidate people? In this season, am I being steadfast, right? Is God my anchor in this season? Or, and you know, my trust in God, is that making me an anchor to the people I lead? Or am I like, hey, you know, the sky's falling and running around and just being afraid? Or am I just going to be steadfast and stay the course and keep doing the same things? Am I being selfless? So am I thinking about just what my needs are and what's best for me in the season? Or am I thinking about what's best for everyone in this season? How can I help others in this season?
Yeah. So I'm hearing from you it's a really a helpful set of filters to see yourself and to sort of audit yourself, and then also for others to hold you accountable to go, hey,
exactly,
this isn't working. You know, you're not doing this particular value, you're living out this particular value.
Yeah. And if I'm doing this, am I influencing people that, like, hey, I want to be strong like that. I want to be steadfast like that. I want to, you know, am I encouraging others to example these same characteristics? And I think you're seeing this a lot right now with people. You're seeing people that are using filters like this, and they're inspiring others. I mean, you think of our healthcare workers, and you think of, you know, everybody that people who work at the grocery store. They're on the front lines too. Not as severe as healthcare workers, obviously, but those folks they're steadfast.
Yeah.
Stay in the course. This is what I do. I heal people.
Yeah.
Am I scared? Yep. But I heal people. That's what I do.
Yeah. So what would you tell to someone who doesn't have that system, that wants that groundedness? Where would you tell them to start?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of a discussion, and you know, it's something I say to my kids a lot. I have teenagers, and so we've had many discussions that revolve around honesty and getting honest. And there are many times I've stopped discussions where I'm like, hey, if you're not going to be honest with me and you're not going to be honest with yourself about this situation, we're spinning our wheels. So let's take a break and walk away, and we'll come back and we'll talk about it again. But in order for this relationship to work, we have to be honest with each other. We have to be honest with ourselves. And so I think that's where it always starts is you have to get honest with yourself, because nobody can lie to you better than you can lie.
Yeah, self-deception.
So until you can get honest with yourself and be real about, okay, these are my shortcomings. These are the things I don't really like about myself, and these are the things that I do like about myself, and these are the things that I want to be.
Yeah.
That's how it starts, right? And then you start developing it. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's practicing. It's like running a marathon, right? You don't wake up and run 26.2 miles in one day. You start by running 1 mile. You start by running 3 miles. And you build. And so,
start small and build from it.
Right. Yep. And so I think that's the lie, is that hey, I'm going to set this up, and then when I fall short, I have to throw it away because because I failed and it didn't work.
Yeah.
It's about getting back up and getting back on the horse and continuing forward. You're going to fall along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to the last section of this interview, and it's kind of super relevant to the situation we're facing. So, life can be unfair, it can be challenging. There are contrasting moments of joy and prosperity with tragedy and sadness. So as people traverse this journey we call life, what words of wisdom would you want to share with our listeners, our
Yeah.
watchers?
You know, prepare for the storm. Obviously, we're in a storm right now, but it's still not too late to prepare for the storm.
Mm-hmm. The one that's the part of it that's yet to come.
The part of it that's yet to come. That's
Yeah.
right. And so prepare for the storm. Don't wait till you're in it. Establish your principles to live by, and stay the course.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm a big believer that action shouldn't be driven by emotions or circumstances,
Yeah.
but by what is right.
Mm-hmm.
And easy or hard should have nothing to do with it. It's just this is what I do. Whether it's easy or it's hard, this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of being intentional with your
Mm-hmm.
actions. Be very thoughtful and be purposeful with your life.
Yeah.
I think mission's the wow, vision's the how, values are the guidelines for achieving, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And lastly, I think ask yourself, who's your market? Who are the people you want to reach?
Mm-hmm.
What's the message that you want to share with those people?
Yeah.
And what's the media that you're going to use to share those messages? And,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be used. Those three questions can be used in business, in personal life, and relationships. I think those are great messages, and a heart of gratitude.
Yeah.
There's still a lot to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so how does one embrace that heart of gratitude?
For me, like I married my wife, Hannah. She was a single mom for 9 years.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, a heart of gratitude is I am so thankful that we're married and that she and the children are here with me
Mm-hmm.
season. And I have the opportunity to be a part of going through this with them. The thought of her trying to maneuver through this storm by herself.
Yeah.
With kids and trying to work and lead kids and do that by herself. That's scary. That's a scary thought to me. So I'm very grateful that God had brought us together and that I have the opportunity to be here with and
to be grateful that we are sheltering in place, but we can do it pretty cozily, it's
it's so funny because World War II, the cry was, the only thing we have to do for evil to succeed is nothing.
Yeah.
And our war cry is like flipped on its head. In order to succeed, we have to do nothing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So now, you mentioned that you were divorced several years back and that was a difficult season for you. So what if you're speaking to someone that is not, they're in the middle of that and now this crisis has just hit?
Yeah.
What's your words of wisdom or encouragement to them?
Yep. When I was in the midst of my season, it's a very, very lonely season. You feel alone and you feel pretty beat up.
Yeah.
And in that season, I really leaned into God and I leaned into my faith, and God really said to me in that season, "Hey, you're not alone. I'm here with you, and I feel the same pain that you feel from your divorce as well."
Yeah.
Because a marriage is it's really a union where it's a husband and a wife working towards that relationship with God. And so when one party leaves, they're not just leaving the husband or the wife, but they're leaving God too.
Yeah.
And so that really helped me to lean into that. And so that would be my encouragement, is to lean into your Heavenly Father, because He lives outside of time, and He sees 1,000 years down the road, right? So He saw this before it was coming, and He sees what's coming out of it down the road.
Yeah.
And lean into your Heavenly Father in this season. He's with you, and He loves you, and He cares about you.
Yeah.
And He won't leave you.
Yeah. Cool. So is there anything else that you wanted to share that we haven't yet covered or didn't get a chance to talk about?
Yeah, I think we covered everything pretty good. Let
All
me
right.
talk. Oh, it's great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your insights. How can people connect with you? How can they access your podcasts? How
Yeah.
do they get, what do you got out there that, in terms
Yeah,
of your,
so Winning at Manhood
okay,
is my podcast. It's Winning at Symbol Manhood, and it's available on anywhere where podcasts are available.
okay,
My blog site's winningatmanhood.blog, and that's
okay,
actually winningatmanhood.blog.
okay, great.
On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you can find me.
All
Uh,
right.
and so, yeah, give it a listen. I'd love your feedback.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll definitely make sure to link it in the blog notes or the interview notes when I post it on my blog. Um, and anything else? Any final thoughts?
Just thanks so much for what you do, Jason. I really appreciate you and everything that you do to pour into people.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me and for sharing your words of wisdom, insights, and inspiration.
All right. It's good to see you again.